Information fueled,
opinion driven. This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
6:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on in your Monday morning, October 7th. Hope you're doing well. I got to tell you, the media, they are just... I'm trying to be respectful, and I don't know why. I'm not trying to be respectful to the media, but I'm trying to be respectful to the fact that there may be kids in the car. So I don't know how to describe the media, but they're all in a tizzy over misinformation. Do you remember Richard Simmons? When Richard Simmons used to just, he's just very effeminate. You know what I mean? So I picture the media screaming the word misinformation in the mannerisms of a Richard Simmons.
Jumping up and down very effortlessly.
Jumping up and down very excitedly about misinformation. And the reality is that they are the ones that have been spewing misinformation. Let's talk about the criticism of Donald Trump in his criticism of FEMA's response to Helene. Because this is what was going on all weekend long on all of the talk shows. Now, remember, one of the TV talk shows, one of the things that I always say is that the media, they are perpetually accusing Donald Trump and his supporters and conservatives of spreading misinformation. Yet they are the ones, clearly, as you know, they are the main purveyors of misinformation. Karine Jean-Pierre, CBS, NBC, ABC, certainly MSNBC, and so forth. Now, I want to remind you what's going on. Of course, in North Carolina, Helene comes in, East Tennessee as well, Georgia, and so forth. But in North Carolina, Western North Carolina, it is still a mess. There are still people that are missing. There are still roads that are blocked, and there are still people, perhaps, I'm not entirely certain of this one, but that still don't have internet access. Bottom line is, the response of FEMA, in my opinion, from what I can tell, has been an absolute train wreck. And so Donald Trump and conservatives are calling out the Biden administration. Kamala Harris as well, of course, she's running for president. But the question is, because Karine Jean-Pierre, remember where we left this off last week, did FEMA money go to help illegal aliens and settle illegal aliens versus being used for disaster relief? That's going to be the big question. Now, if you were out there like me on Thursday, Friday, whatever days of last week, calling out the Biden administration for spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on Ukraine and settling illegal aliens, and not having any money for disaster victims, yeah, that was me. And I wasn't spreading misinformation. In my opinion, I'm spreading facts. But here's the thing, is that the White House and the media, they're trying to split hairs. So let's go back now, shall we, and play some audio that is certainly relevant to this conversation. This was Karine Jean-Pierre back in, I believe it was 2022, as she and the Biden-Harris administration were bringing migrants by the busloads and by planes along with wide open southern border. And this is Karine Jean-Pierre talking about how they are working to settle these folks here in America.
So FEMA regional administrators have been meeting with city officials on site to coordinate available federal support from FEMA and other federal agencies. Funding is also available through FEMA's emergency food and shelter.
I mean, she's saying FEMA funds, FEMA funds, FEMA funds. FEMA managers, FEMA officials we're all meeting with, so on and so forth. This is Karine Jean-Pierre back in 2022. Over and over again talking about FEMA.
Program to eligible local governments and non-for-profit organizations upon request to support humanitarian relief for migrants.
All right, so FEMA funds and FEMA resources going to help settle these migrants. Now, what does she say now?
It's just categorically false. It is not true. It is a false statement. And look, the fact of the matter is, I think Washington Post fact checker did a piece, and the headline recently, just moments ago, not too long ago, and the headline was, "No, Biden did not take FEMA relief money to use on migrants, but Trump did."
All right, so the argument seems to be one of semantics. Here's how CBS reports it. Trump and his allies appear to be conflating two different funds. FEMA has dedicated disaster relief money they say that cannot be used for other purposes. Separately, it was tasked by Congress in 2022 to disseminate money from Customs and Border Protection to help communities that received influxes of migrants. So, in other words, they're trying to, play the two separate accounts game. You have the funds for disaster relief and the other fund for migrants, plain and simple. Definitely a line in between those two funds. At least that's what the White House and the Washington Post, that's what they're trying to say. Here's the answer to that, though, because as the left is screaming misinformation on FEMA money being used for illegal aliens, this is what the FEMA director says.
This level of misinformation creates the scenario where they won't even come to us. They won't even register. And I need people to register so they can get what they're eligible for through our programs.
So here's would be then my question to that. Then, number one, why is it that you're budgeting so much money for the processing of illegal aliens and you're using so much money for Ukraine, regardless of what fund it comes out of, and not enough funding for disaster relief? So either way, it is poor planning. There is truth to the fact that we are spending more money on illegal aliens and Ukraine than on Americans and disaster relief. So I don't care how you phrase it. I don't care what account it comes out of. How many of us have had money earmarked for whatever it may be, and then we need a new battery, we need a new tire, we need to get the car repaired, and we're able to move funds from one place to another? And so for the Washington Post and for the media and for Cringe Jean-Pierre, misinformation, it's really not. What they're trying to do is they're trying to just do their best to obfuscate what is really going on.
This level of misinformation creates the scenario where they won't even come to us. They won't even register. And I need people to register so they can get what they're eligible for through our programs.
All right. So, number one, part of the problem that North Carolina specifically is having is there's a lot of people that are just saying, okay, so where do you register? How do you register? Where is FEMA? So on and so forth. Kristen Welker had the Senator Tom Cotton on. He's from Arkansas, and she framed it this way.
Senator, what do you say to that criticism that Mr. Trump is confusing people at a very time when they need help the most?
So what confuses me, I'll play the audio of Tom Cotton here in a second, but here's what confuses me, Kristen Welker, is that we do have people on the ground who say that FEMA is nowhere to be found. There are hundreds of videos showing people feeling abandoned. They can't find FEMA. FEMA is nowhere to be found. They've got no food. They've got no water. They've got no internet. There's no way to find FEMA. They're just not there. Glenn Beck goes out there and witnesses firsthand the issues with FEMA and people feeling abandoned. And so I guess my question would be this, and I did ask this question the other day. Fox News, I've got Fox News on here in the studio. And they're on the ground in North Carolina. They're speaking to people who are saying FEMA is not there. So who are you going to believe? Who do you believe? You believe FEMA? You believe the Biden administration? You believe the media? You believe the fact checkers out there? Because let's all be honest about the ability of the Biden administration and the fact checkers to tell you the truth. They've been gaslighting you for the last almost 4 years. Whether it's on the economy, whether it's on the border, whether it is on Joe Biden's fitness to serve, these same people that are, sort of eye-rolling about this fact-checking regarding FEMA, the reality is that you can't trust the media. You certainly can't trust the Biden administration. You can't trust the fact-checkers. I trust the people on the ground. I trust the people that are posting videos and saying that FEMA, their response has been lackluster, to say the least. because that's what liars do. They lie. This is what Tom Cotton says.
Well, I don't think he's confusing anyone. I think the administration did get caught flat-footed here, and that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have proven to be overmatched by events again. And I think the administration from the very beginning should have been deploying military assets necessary, specifically helicopters, to get in there. It took them days to do that. There's hundreds of military helicopters within flying distance of this area. That should have happened from the very beginning.
He's right. I mean, why did it take so long? One of the things that I said on Friday, can you imagine if we had put the full force of the federal government, the kind of motivation and inspiration and enthusiasm we have to send all of that military equipment, all of that logistical equipment, all the way to Ukraine. But we couldn't get any equipment to North Carolina? Again, Donald Trump and others wouldn't be talking about the lackluster performance on the ground in North Carolina and other places if it wasn't for the people literally on the ground giving us their experience. You see, the media and Kristen Welker, they still don't get it. George Stephanopoulos, they still don't get it. People are no longer taking their word for it. The reason why people are no longer taking their word for it is because they have been caught lying again and again and again and again. And yeah, again, Tom Cotton is correct when they talk about what is going on the ground.
My broader question to you, I think, is about this misinformation. Do you think this is a time to put falsehoods aside, like the idea that FEMA funds are being redirected to migrants, which is just not true?
Well, you know what falsehoods I would like to put aside, just since we're talking about falsehoods? I would like to put, and I would say this to Kristen Welker, I would like to put aside the falsehood of this Agenda 2025 BS that you're trying to hang over Donald Trump's head. That is a falsehood. You want to talk about the falsehood that the border is secure, that falsehood that the Biden administration tried to sell for the last 3.5 to 4 years? Can we put away the falsehood that Donald Trump will sign a federal abortion ban? You see, if we're going to talk about falsehoods, I would say to Kristen Welker, if we're going to talk about putting falsehoods aside, I've got a whole list of falsehoods that I would like to put aside, since we're talking about misinformation.
It is true that FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security have been spending billions of dollars on migrants. Now, I understand some people say they're separate funds, but we just passed a short-term spending bill. It's very common for the administration to come and ask for permission to move money between funds, especially to prepare for emergencies. And second, I would note that this administration seems to have no problem finding money when they want to spend it on their priorities. When they need hundreds of billions of dollars to pay off student loans for graduate students in gender studies programs, they somehow find it. When it's trying to get helicopters to deliver food and water and cellular service and life-saving medicine into these mountain valleys, they somehow can't seem to find the money.
I mean, somebody please tell me where Tom Cotton is wrong. He's not wrong. And Kristen Welker and all of these hand-wringing, air quotes, journalists on the left, you know, the ones that Kamala Harris, she's going to be doing all kinds of interviews with over the next 30 days because they are panicking on the left. But I think that if we're going to start talking about putting aside misinformation and talking about misinformation, there's a lot that could be discussed. Of course, we all know that the left has absolutely no interest in talking about the real misinformation that they continue to spread.